We're speaking today with Naveen Pathak, Associate Director of Manufacturing Science and Technology at Genzyme, Sanofi Company, and I appreciate you being with us today.
Well, thank you.
So your presentation at BPI this afternoon discussed manufacturing strategy and a strategic technical life cycle plan for a legacy biological process. Why are life cycle plans important for legacy biologics?
Sure, yeah, so this is the message I was delivering in the morning today. And well, first of all, I'd like to answer why are they important, and then we can talk specifically about, for legacy products. So I think basically what I communicated in the morning is that, as we heard from many talks, there is a need for speed during initial commercial development to bring the product to market. And the process development, it really gets squeezed. So what happens is that right when you get approval, you already have a list of untapped opportunities that essentially it moves to the future development column, and this is really the start of an opportunity where you feel the need of creating a plan so that you can manage all these untapped opportunities. And that's really the technical life cycle plan. It's really an integrated work plan that takes all process improvement opportunity, all opportunities, all process remediation efforts, all of the technical agenda that you have, it puts it into one work plan, which is then linked to your product strategy, your business strategy. So it's not an academic exercise, it is actually linked to your business. And that's why it's important, because it ensures that your process stays compliant. It ensures your process and what it delivers to you stays in sync with what the business, what the long-range plan is asking for. Now, why is it more important for legacy products? Well, you see, legacy products, they got developed, 10, 15 years ago. They were approved, a decade plus ago. And well, a lot of time has passed, and for many of them, they are in full commercial production, and improvement sometimes takes a sort of a backbench. So it's even more important for those products to really bring together this integrated work plan so that a concerted effort could be made to engage in this kind of a structured activity. But it is equally important for products that have been recently approved, because the opportunity is the greatest to never get things out of control, so that there is a plan right from the beginning, such that the opportunities, the process improvement efforts continue to happen as the product matures.
So speaking of the kind of the life cycle planning for some of these products, are there any regulatory considerations that you take into account for these sort of already commercialized product, and you're sort of thinking about the life cycle planning for already commercialized products?
So absolutely. So I think there are two aspects that go into that. So one is that, well, some of the need for having this TLCP, this technical life cycle plan, is driven by the C in the CGMP, which is basically making sure that you always are aligned with the current good manufacturing practices. And these keep evolving. Regulatory agencies are putting out new guidelines, the expectations are changing. So part of the technical life cycle plan is to adjust the process, improve the process to stay in sync with these regulatory expectations. The other part where the regulatory piece comes into play is that anytime you're trying to make changes to the process, well, of course, we are in a very regulated industry, and rightly so. I mean, our product is of a significant nature. We can't, just mess around. So all the changes we make, it has to go through regulatory filing in all the jurisdictions and has to get approved. So which means that any change you make, it's not just the act of the technical, it's not just a technical change you're trying to make. It's actually much bigger than that in terms of the effort it takes, in terms of the timelines, in terms of what it takes to actually have that change completely done. So that's another piece where one always has to integrate the regulatory strategy, or sometimes referred to as integrated regulatory strategy, into this work plan. So basically, regulatory aspect plays both in creation of it and implementation of it.
And what about technology? How does technology come into play in terms of this whole sort of life cycle planning and the technical life cycle plan? Are there any particular technologies that enable better planning?
So, well, technology enabling better planning. Well, I think I would say that is primarily, there's an element of technology just helping make things easier. But that I think, I guess I'm guessing your question is more about how is process technology
Correct.
making things better. So the way I look at it is that technology is a means to an end. So I think really what you're trying to achieve is you're trying to solve problems, and these problems are primarily, what a future state is expected to be from either long-range plan perspective or from quality perspective, from regulatory perspective, and what you have at the moment. That's the delta you're trying to bridge. Now, technology can help you bridge that. So, there might be a new process technology that allows you to move to that future state more seamlessly, and in that case, you adopt that. But I think more or less, I don't believe that you do projects simply to add new technology to it. Mostly it is to enable the goal you're trying to achieve anyway. And some examples of that could be you may implement newer chromatography resins because you realize that, look, you use an older resin, maybe it's harder to clean, maybe you don't get as much throughput through it, maybe you have to do multiple cycles, and that's not good for cost of goods. And you decide, hey, if I move to this new resin, well, I can only maybe do one cycle, and I can reduce my cost of goods. So that way you use the technology to achieve an objective, which was ultimately to reduce cost of goods. Mm-hmm. There might be other ways to reduce cost of goods. This just happened to be one of them.
Right. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing the bioprocessing industry today?
Well, this is a good question, and actually I just came out of a talk where Jim Thomas was talking about it, and several speakers since morning in various talks have talked about it, and I can give you my perspective. I'm not, don't have a crystal ball, but I believe the real transformation that has to come, and I think biosimilar is going to be a big player in that. We don't know how it'll go, but I think it'll be, is really the cost control. I believe that, the biologics are very expensive medicines. And I think there will come a point where it'll simply not be, they will not be affordable by our healthcare system. Well, that's point A. And then point B, if you look at, how the cost has changed for some other pharmaceuticals that have existed for the last 5 decades or so, they were very expensive at one time, relatively speaking, and then they, their cost dramatically reduced over several decades. So I think some of that transformation, I believe, will happen for biologics as well. It remains to be seen how it will happen and how fast it will happen, but that is much needed. And I think that will actually bring some radical transformation in the way we manufacture drugs, right? From facilities, from our processes, because really at this point, as much as we try to reduce cost of goods, that's always a driver. We are not, our industry does not have that much cost of goods pressure. It's primarily driven by, time to market, compliance, making sure that we are in good standing with regulatory agencies, we can meet the supply. But cost actually, for many biologics across the board, has not been, cost of goods has not been a key player. And I believe that as we move forward, maybe in a decade or so, it'll increasingly become the factor, and that would change how we make drugs.
So for biotherapeutics drug developers and thinking about the bioprocessing industry and new biologics drugs that are emerging, do you see any trends or new kind of opportunities still to be exploited? Well,
I don't, I think we'll all, for quite some time, we'll still see a lot of antibodies. That's the biggest share. I think the enzyme replacement therapy is very promising. I think there are many products that you hear about that are in various stages of clinical development. And there are, we just heard about other modalities, entities, bites and things like that, which I'm not familiar with. But I think, needless to say, there will be new kinds of things that will come. And I'm actually curious to hear about that as well, because when you get into the bio manufacturing industry, you kind of try to focus on what is out there at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I have the same question as you do in that case.
Right. And finally, Naveen, I know that you've participated in the BioProcess International Conference for several years. What do you like best about this meeting?
There are a few things, right? So it really brings a lot of participation, which has a domino effect because, a lot of times that if you go to this conference, you're going to hear a lot of ideas, you're going to meet a lot of people, network with them, you'll hear some great talks, and every talk you hear, you'll get some message that you can take back. Secondly, I think it's the show, the vendor show is always quite informative because, in our industry, actually, I would say vendors actually are leading the innovation in many ways, right? And then companies adopt those innovations. That's true for disposable systems or, many other systems where vendors have made the innovation or the advances, and then the manufacturers have adopted those. So I think that is always a good, aspect of the conference. And usually you guys choose a good location, which is always good to be. I mean, Boston for me was convenient. I live, just 40 miles west, but in the past, been to San Francisco, and so yeah, that's always a good thing.
Great. So Naveen, I'd like to thank you for taking the time with me this afternoon. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.